Continuing with solving quadratic equations, we shall look at some examples and look at all the various ways we can solve this. I'll basically use three ways to solve this equation. For example, I can take my first example as x squared minus x minus 29 equals to a 1. So I'll first of all use factorization, then the bulldozer formula, then as well completing squares. So I'll begin with factorization method. Some questions might even just come and say factorize and hence solve the equation. So but for this case we're just solving direct. So when they tell us to factorize, we stop on the step of factorization. If they tell us to hence solve, we continue and equate that equation to a 0. So for us to solve, we equate the equation to a 0. Is it okay? So for this case, I'll begin with factorization. But having seen that this is already a quadratic equation, I'll just have to arrange it in the form of ax squared plus bx plus sc equals to a 0. It has to always be in this form. So from there I'll use my factorization. So what will I do? I'll make sure that I bring this one this side. How? I'll just say x squared minus x minus 29. Then the one crosses the equal sign becomes a negative. This will equate to a 0. So I'll have my x squared minus x minus 30 equals to a 0. So that is my equation I'm having right there. So what do? We have said when we are using what we call the factorization method, we shall consider two aspects. Always consider the sum and the product. So this is the position of always the sum. The sum is always a coefficient on x, whereas we said this is the position of our sum, whereas we say the product is always the coefficient on x squared times the constant will always give us our product. So looking critically on this equation, our sum is a negative 1. Reason being the coefficient of this x is a negative 1. Then the product will be the coefficient on x squared, which is 1 times a negative 30. We get a negative 30. So why do they call it factorization? We have to get two factors. When we multiply them, we get a negative 30. And when we add them, we get a negative 1. So how shall we go about this? Leaving the signs aside, be critical and see which two numbers can you multiply to get 30. First, leave the signs alone. And those two numbers should at least have a close difference of 1. So which are those two numbers? Because I can multiply 3 times 10, I can get 30. But is there a close difference of 1? So still when I multiply 5 times 6, I can get a 30. But at least I can see there is a 1. Because from 5 to 6 there is that 1. So we can also get a 30. Mean that idea those two numbers are 5 and 6. So the factors we are looking for, we shall be 5 and 6. Because you are seeing when you multiply them you get a 30. And this is sum here. There is a 1. There's a difference of 1 in between these two. So from there, then put into consideration the signs. Make sure when you multiply these two numbers, will you get a negative 30? And when you subtract them, will you get a negative 1? So, where will you have to put the negative? So, for us to subtract and get a negative answer, it always means that the bigger number always has the negative. So, the negative will go in negative 6, so that when I subtract and say 5, okay, when I add, because this is a sum, when I add and I say 5 plus negative 6, it will ideally give me a negative 1, and when I multiply them I'll get still a negative 30. So this will be my factors. Then after getting the factors, the question is, where will you put those factors? Are you seeing the position of the sum? The sum is a negative 1. When you say 5 plus 6, what do you get? You get negative 1. So it ideally means the position of the sum shall be substituted using these factors we have gotten. And we have ideally seen when we add them, we shall come back to that negative 1. So, but since our sum had x, we shall also include x on our factors. So, we shall just simply say x squared. Now, instead of putting negative x, which is or negative 1, we shall just substitute the position of the sum with its factors. So, I can say plus 5x, then minus 6a. So where there is this sum, I've put there the factors. Are you seeing that when you say 5x plus 6x, are you seeing that you're getting a negative x? Because if the x's are 5 and they are positive, and you have some other x's which are negative and there are 6 of them, we know that the negative goes with the positive. This x will go with that, this with that, this with that. So we end up having a remainder of a negative 1. So it ideally means these factors have substituted that. So don't forget the x's, I've included them. Then minus our 30. This will equal to a 0. From there you pair 2. You pair 2. Is it okay? Then you factorize out what is in common. So for the first bracket, I can see that x is in common. I can pull the x out. I remain with the x. Then here also, I remain with the 5. I've removed 1x. I've removed 1x. That's why I'm remaining with the 1. And here there is no. Then here, when you look critically, a negative is common. Pull it out. What else is common? A 6. 6 is common. When you pull out a 6 here, you remain with the 1 times x, you remain with the x. When you remember this negative was pulled out, we pulled out a negative. Even here we pulled out a negative. It means that this is now a positive. We removed this negative and we pulled it out. Since it was common here and here, we pulled out a negative 6. It ideally means we no longer have a negative on 6 and we're no longer having a negative on negative 3. They are now positive. The reason being we put out the negative, so don't include the negative sign here. So when you say, so in other words, when you are factorizing, what are we doing? When you say I'm pulling out x, this what you pull out divides. You say x squared divided by x, you get x. 5x divided by x, you get 5. So when you pull out a negative 6, what you pull out will have to divide. What you pull out has to divide. So we pulled out a negative 6. It means that this negative 6 will divide negative 6x. We get x. In other words, we're having a negative 6x divided by negative 6. Negative and negative 6 and that. So that's why we're having our x. We put the x here. So negative 30 still divided by negative 6. Negative goes with a negative. Then by 6, 1 by 6, 5. That's why here we have our answer as 5 equals to 0. Always make sure that this bracket here is always the same as this. So if you see that you're having the same bracket here and here, just know that you're on the right track. So since these two brackets are the same, you take this x outside here minus this. So and this here, take those outside here and there. So minus 6. Then over these two brackets you take 1. You say x plus 5 equals to a 0. So ideally you now say either one of those brackets equals to a 0. You say either one of the bracket is x minus 6 equals to a 0. And when the 6 crosses the equal sign, it becomes a what? Negative 6 becomes 6. Or the other bracket, which was x plus 5 equals to a 0. So our x will equal to a negative 5. Therefore our x will equal to 6. over x will equal to a negative 5. So when you're always solving quadratic equations, you get two answers. So those are the answers we have come up with. So that is the first method we call factorize, as simple as it is. So let us just go to another method, still the same example, the bulldozer formula. You remember the bulldozer formula is in the form of x equals to negative b plus or minus root of b squared minus 4ac over our 2a. So put the quadratic equation here. It is x squared. You remember we shall pull it out at this step. Step when it is arranged. This minus 30 equals to az. So this equation is arranged and simplified. Can't you see that it is in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals to 0. So the position of a, just compare this and this. So a will be a 1. A will be a 1 because here, what is here is an invisible 1. So when you compare a, it will be a 1. When you compare b, so this is xx, it means that our b will be a negative 1, be a negative 1. C, negative 30. So our c is negative 30. From there, just to go and substitute into the bulldozer formula. So you say our x, since we are looking for the value of x, you can use x, substitute with the brackets, negative, leave it the way it is, then you put our b, which is a negative 1, plus or minus root of, what is the, so here I'm using the bulldozer approach. So into root of, what is our b? If you are following the bulldozer, negative 1, then you put the squared the way it is, minus 4. What is our a? Substitute with the brackets, please. 1 c, what is the c? Negative 30 over 2. What is our a? It is a 1. So you come negative times a negative, get a positive 1 plus or minus root of 1 negative squared. When you are putting in the calculator, please put a bracket. So it is always a positive. Negative times a negative, it is a positive. 4 times 30, it is a 120 over 2. 2 times 1, 2 times 1, it is a 2. So from there, this will give us 1 plus or minus root of 121. So here you have to know square numbers. So remember 12 times 12 is 121. So it means the square root of 121 is 12. So it is 1 plus or minus, it is 11, because you say 11 times 11 is 121. So the square root of 121 is gonna be 11 over 2. So from there, we shall either consider positive first. So if I consider positive, I'll have my x equating to 1 plus 11 over 2. So 1 plus 11 is 12 over 2, it is a c. So that is my first value for a. Then when I consider negative, so my shall have x equaling to 1. Remember there are two signs here. Square root is either positive or negative. So 1 minus 11 over 2. This will give us a negative 1 minus 11 is a negative 10 over 2. This will give us a negative 5. That is, so therefore our x is a 6, or our x is a negative 5, as we have seen. So still this is the same answer we are getting. So I'm going to use the same approach when I'm completing squares, and you see, shall we come up with the same answers? Okay, so our example was still x squared minus x. I've just put the simplified version. You remember we simplified it to come up with this. It was that, but I simplified to come up with that. We said when we are completing squares, we said make sure that we always put the constant on the right So put the constant on the right. X squared minus x equals to a third. I put the constant on the right. So I put my constant on the right. So after putting the constant on the right, we say the second step is to see that the coefficient on x squared is a 1. Is the coefficient on x squared a 1? It is true. Our coefficient on x squared is a 1. So from there, we said we look at the position of the sum. The position of the sum is this. We obtain the coefficient. What is the coefficient of that? So the coefficient will be a negative 1. And what we said is, what do we do to the coefficient? We multiply it by a half. Then the answer we get, which is the answer, negative a half. So it's upon you by the way. Some people consider the negative. Some people just take it the way it is. Some people can just say I'm taking a 1 and they leave the negative out. So there is a way they shall cater for that, and we see. So there is a way we shall cater for that.